trying to wake them up. It's what we talked about all the years in the joint, preparing for.
Right.
The time is now. Show and prove.
Better believe.
God always here.
Facts.
God always here.
Facts. Speak on it. Facts.
That's right.
That truth out there.
That's right.
This is our truth. This is how we bringing it. This is what we giving.
I'm ready to go down here now and film an episode of Knowledge TV. Why you don't come down here and spit some of that for the people?
God, that's what I'm here for. If the invite there, I'm there.
And you know I got to have a God, you know.
I'm in the building. God is in the building, man.
Let me hit the man. All right, let me hit the man.
The man with the plan, what's happening? How you doing?
Peace, peace, we here.
All right, y'all upstairs?
Yeah, we here. We ready to build. It's build time. We here, go time.
You got the brother with you?
We here. That's right. We ready to come in.
All right, cool. You ready?
That's right. Knowledge Yourself TV time.
Yeah, you know we got you at JS Media, man.
Buzz me in.
All right, that's what it is.
It's go time, bro. God always here.
Let's make it happen. Let's
God
go.
always here. Hands up, peace.
What's up, brother? Good, man. Good to see you, man. Good to meet you, man. Saquon, man.
Lakhem, brother.
All right, Lakhem, that's what it is, man.
Pleasure to meet you, man. Heard a lot about you. You know what I'm saying? Heard your skill set is immaculate, and I appreciate that, man.
So I should get a platform. All this stuff, like I ain't get no bread, nothing from it. You feel me? I put all bread in here,
right,
so we can have the top-notch mics, the top-notch technology.
Right.
Got with this brother so we could do what we need to do.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that. We appreciate you opening your doors to us, allowing us to build, because this gives us a chance to give back.
Right.
You know, in Arabic is a word called zakat, which means charity. And in charity, don't always have to be a physical gift. It can be a gift in different ways. You know what I'm saying? And so we want to utilize what you have built.
Because I don't know what possessed me. I just was staying here. I was staying here until I built this.
Appreciate that,
that's
love.
Hard.
That's where we at.
That's all, and that's what I want. Right. That's what this here for. I want you to have your own, like the same way when he first came here, brother. He was like, "What we gonna do?" I'm like, "Well, what you gonna do?" You feel what I'm saying? Like, yo, this is your show. What you gonna do? He was like, "What?" I said, "No, this is your show."
And the goal is to make an impact. The goal is to, be successful. Absolutely. We not doing this to be a beggar people. Beggar people can't attain to the highest planes of spiritual development in life. So, we definitely looking at each other.
That's right.
No doubt. So we're talking TV. We're not talking a passion project.
Right. That's right.
We're talking station. We're talking evening.
Right.
We just trying to get content to put out there for the people, that the people can develop off of, the people can grow off of. It be something that's inspirational for the people, something that's instructional for the people, something that's elevating. I'd like to welcome everybody to Knowledge Yourself TV. Before I introduce my guests, I first want to speak a little bit about Knowledge Yourself TV, the purpose, the mission, and the aim. I want to read this quote, Egyptian proverb. All is within yourself. Know your most inward self and look for what corresponds with it in nature. Now think about that. So many of our teachings today force or pushes us to focus on things outside of ourselves, rituals, signs and symbols, acting as other people acted. But true growth and development come from the maturity of self, the growing of that spirit or that seed within, the spark we spoke about in the previous episode. In maturing that self, in growing that self is how true revelation, how true knowledge of self, how true growth in life comes. Knowledge of Self TV is focused on the maturing of that self, the growing of that self, and the giving the information and teachings to help individuals on their way of accomplishing self-discovery, self-mastery. For too long, our people have followed behind the traditions and teachings of others. So we not recreating the wheel, but we just reordering the spokes on the wheel so that we see the whole picture clearly. So we not here to dispute, to question what anyone else believe. We are more so here to help our people develop, to teach from our experiences. Knowledge Itself TV is focused on that. We are here to bring content to help individuals develop. It's not smoke and mirrors. You ain't gonna see a whole bunch of debating. It's just conscious knowledge building amongst men who've been through suffering, travail in life, and who now here to learn or teach from the wisdom gleaned from those experiences to help teach the people. And that's why we're here today. So, with that being said, I'd like to introduce my first guest. It brings me great honor to introduce this man. In 1998, when I entered maximum security prison, this was my first torch or first light or the first individual to introduce me to truth, the 5% lessons, nation of the gods and earth.
That's peace.
So with that being said, I'd like to introduce my friend, Lakhem Rasabek.
Peace.
Peace, God.
Peace. How's the brother?
Pretty good. Yourself?
All is well. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
Glad that you thought enough of me and what I had to offer to keep me on your mind and in your agenda.
Without a doubt. Yeah. So, the conversation today is a free-flowing conversation, but just for topic's sake. In the build-off of what we have already discussed previously, I want to talk about the family. I want to talk about man, woman, and child.
Yes.
I want to talk about our communities. I want to talk about the state of consciousness of man, woman, and child. Briefly into the violence in our communities,
Right.
the interaction between male and female, the purpose of fathers and being leaders and torchbearers in our community.
Right.
And build on that topic first and see where the conversation takes us.
Yes. First of all, the questions are kind of loaded and they have dualities to them. And it's a very good question that you posed. So I'll try to unravel them as best I can.
Sure.
I believe that the community suffers from a breakdown in the family structure because of the man not being the man, the woman having to play the role of the man, and the children, which are a reflection of the man and the woman, they suffer the most. And so they grow up without guidance because most of the men are either dead, in jail, or on drugs. So it causes the woman to have to become the man in a lot of different ways. And one of the example I want to give is real basic, but nonetheless, it's a good example. I went to the market recently with my sister, and she grabbed all the bags, loaded all the bags in the car until I stopped her. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she's so used to men not taking charge and not having an active ability to summon what it is to be a man in them, that the woman has actually had to man the station of men for so long. And in the nation of gods and earth, so in the 5% nation, we were taught this, that man, woman, and child is your personal universe, that the man represents the sun and the woman is the moon, and your stars are your children or your babies. And the man's duty and role was to shine light as the sun to the woman who is the moon. And the woman is to reflect her light to the children who are the stars. Now, what happened was the personal solar system, the man, the woman, and the child in our community got disrupted by ideas and cultures from outside of them that uprooted the principles of what man, woman, and child should live by. And because that happened, it kind of handicapped the family structure, or it removed a vital organ from the family structure.
Before you go on, I want to actually build a little more on that about culture. Because we think about the news media, we see city in crisis, we see, violence and the way that African American males are portrayed on TV as if we these violent, dangerous criminals.
Right.
When you look at, there are more African American males in college than it is actually in prison.
Exactly.
But the media won't show that. So can you speak a little bit about how the media influences culture?
Right. Once again, I got to compliment you on another good question. Allow me to build on that from this perspective. When you look at Chinatown in New York or Baltimore or any major city around the country, you don't hear about the triads committing the crimes that they commit in Chinatown. You don't hear about the Italians committing the crime that they commit in Little Italy. But for some reason, they want us to believe that black males are the ones who are only out in these streets committing crimes, breaking laws, and doing all these things. And so what that does is it portrays a false image to the world that we are these monsters or these uncivilized men. And so the culture of violence have been so catered and given to us on a platter. We have been fed this through movies like Scarface, King of New York, and all of these Italian mob movies. And because their culture was so dominant on TV, we really didn't have any heroes to look up to, so we embraced them. Even rappers will name themselves after Capone or, guys with these names. And so children grow up thinking these are the people who they should emulate.
But in reality, I seen a Frank Matthews documentary.
Yes.
And Frank Matthews spoke about how the leader of the Gambino family put the police on him.
Exactly.
They ratted on him.
Exactly.
Dude, Lenny Jones from Baltimore. Lenny Jones say all the mob dudes rats.
Exactly.
But we admire them and we put them on a pedestal. We take their names and we admire their culture as if they are the if, it, and be all. But our culture is the dominant culture. They follow us and we follow the people that follow us.
Exactly. And I find it amazing how you can ask anybody about Frank Nitti or Al Capone, but if you ask them about Nat Turner, they know nothing about Nat Turner. And to me, Nat Turner was a black man who definitely was super gangster. For him to have the courage and the heart that he had to perform the act that he performed, to liberate his people by a vision that he said he got from God, to free us and liberate us from plantation. And he went from plantation to plantation, liberating us by any means necessary. Now, what I want to build on also is that you said something that was very significant and powerful again when you talked about the mob and how they always worked with law enforcement. In fact, whenever they wanted a problem removed, they would call law enforcement to remove that problem. And I believe that
and that law enforcement were tools to keep us oppressed. The slave catchers. We understand the history of where they came from, and how it was a collective effort to keep us subjugated and oppressed.
And that subjugation is still perpetuated in their laws. Whenever you see a sign that says no loitering, this sign was created because whites actually feared groups of blacks or groups of Latinos coming together. That unity that they saw, they had to criminalize it or make it look illegal to make us believe that we can't come together in gatherings without a criminal act taking place. And they feared our unity because with our unity comes liberation.
So with that being said, and to dig deeper into culture. Let's speak about rap music. It's the 50th year anniversary celebration of rap music. I know you're an artist yourself. I know you spit, you got bars, right?
Yes, this is true.
All right, so since we're talking about culture, let's dig a little bit deeper. I want to ask about hip hop. Now, I grew up in the 80s, area, my formative years. And I was a hip hop kid. That's all I listened to. Right? So my first concert was the NWA concert. They booed Too Short off the stage. Now, I have to be honest and admit that I believe that in my life and growing up in my adolescence, that certain hip hop or certain rap had a negative impact on me in my life. I was trying to live out and portray a lot of the things that I heard the rappers say. And most of them weren't living it. So I'm just asking, would you agree that hip hop has had a negative effect on our community also? Now, we know it had a good effect. It had a positive effect in the lives of the family of the rappers. But asking about rap, would you agree that rap has had a negative impact on our community?
Once again, the question is a very good question and it is very loaded. So as I pick the question apart, allow me to give you one example of how manipulative language can be and how perception can be manipulated. Hip hop and rap are not the same. Hip hop is the culture that we produced. Rap is one facet of that culture. Example, hip hop is based on our dress code, graffiti artists, dancers, and a lifestyle that has influenced even fashion designers. Rap by itself did not do that. You never saw a red colored Yankee hat. The traditional Yankee hat is blue, but it is because of the impact of hip hop that clothes, fashion has changed how people dress. You never saw businessmen with Stan Smith Adidas on with dress pants and a baseball cap like you see Russell Simmons do and get away with it. But this is the impact of hip hop. It breaks rules, it breaks boundaries, and it makes it socially acceptable. So hip hop in and of itself has always been a liberating tool. Even the music, when you had Kool Moe Dee and the Rakhims and the Big Daddy Kanes that had these messages that liberated our minds and taught us, and at the same time we felt good about what they were saying. Rap in and of itself was taken over by the structure. Once the structure and the power structure start putting big money into artists,
Those systems.
the system itself forced the artists to sell out and to cater to violence and disrespect to women. And because of that, it became a trend that became socially acceptable in our environments that, okay, if NWA said this, if this rapper said that or that rapper said that, then it must be peace or cool to move that way. One prime example I always give, I always point people back to Rakhem. Listen to all of Rakhem's albums. He never had to call a woman a bitch. He never had to talk about selling drugs. He never had to talk about anything but his lyrical skill, and he sold records. And to this day, he is considered the most prominent and influential and most sampled artist in hip hop.
All right, so we separating rap from hip hop.
Yes.
And we separating true artists, true rap artists, or gangster rap artists to be specific, so to speak. The way they coined that term.
Right, exactly.
Right? Versus hip hop artists, KRS-One,
right,
Rakim,
exactly.
those type of individuals.
Exactly.
Right? But they do still both exist in the same strata, in the same.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we saying that the one had negative and the one had positive.
Right.
You know, because I'm self-admitting that I still listen. I mean, you know, it's the God. I can't get away from it. I work hard. That's how I go hard. You know, you have to be connected and plugged into what the young people, you know, are listening to.
Right.
But when you think about the drug culture,
right.
When you think about how, you know, I know even in the joint, dudes who've been locked up for years start messing with Molly. Because they hear rappers talking about Molly.
Exactly.
So dudes who've never even been exposed.
Right.
Because they trying to portray the lifestyle and feel a way that they feel.
Right.
So, you know, we would have to say, so you agree that rap has had a negative impact.
I agree.
Okay.
And in my building on that and my explanation of why I say that, let me talk about the energy of rap. The energy of the beat, the vibration, the tone of the voice, all of this. Rap itself is influential. It is influential because it has a seducer's tone. It has an element in it that can arouse certain things in you. When you listen to that, listen to Kool G Rap from the 80s. Listen to Mano now. Mano talks about the street. Mano talks about his experience. But what makes Mano and Uncle Murder authentic is that, like us, they have lived it. Our issue is with the negative impact that these guys have on people, and they have not even lived it. Me and you and others like us, we receive life sentences, 50 years and 30 years, for a lifestyle that we was living. We was punished for that. So how can a rap artist who have not lived it get millions, get all of these deals for rapping about what they did not do? Let me explain this. This is how they get the millions. They get the millions because these corporations that have forced them to sell out will only offer the most money to certain rappers who have this influence, this vibrational tone that's going to lead more of us into the penitentiary. And because of that vibrational tone and where it leads us in these places, they want to cater to that music. They want to cater to the thoughts. They want our women to continue in a lifestyle that is destructive. Now, if you listen to a lot of artists like Uncle Murder and Mano, there's still a hidden message in their songs. You have to take the time to pick them apart, and their lifestyle is a testament to the pain of what we was given in these ghettos, in these hoods where we all come from.
Okay, good. So what I'm getting is that the culture has been co-opted
Right,
by individuals who push certain artists
right,
who they believe will lead the culture astray or
exactly.
keep the negative
Very well put.
messaging
Right,
impact or intact.
facts.
So what that make me think about is Carter G. Woodson.
Right,
You know, Carter G. Woodson, the miseducation of the Negro.
right,
Right. So and he talk about how that if you control how people think,
right,
you don't have to worry about their actions because they're
exactly.
gonna act just according to how you train them to think.
Right,
So culture is the means
right,
in which our oppressors use to control
exactly.
how we think,
Right,
thereby controlling our actions. So
exactly.
when Dracos get promoted, you know, our little kids who listen to it, they're gonna want a Draco
Right,
because the culture demands it, the culture suggests
right,
it. All right, so to elevate it, to take it somewhere else, we can't speak about, and you mentioned it earlier, rap music and its impact without speaking about the role of women
right,
and how our women portrayed. And you
right,
mentioned the bitch word and how that word
right,
wasn't used, and Rakim
right,
didn't speak about this thing. Now, if we look at our women, the mothers of our children,
right,
how does that impact the mother? How does that impact her womb? How
right,
does that impact the child she's carrying?
right,
When she driving and the music she hears refers to her as a bitch or a whore,
right,
where all culture is beating her down, her hair isn't good enough.
right,
Her
right,
butt isn't big enough.
right,
You know what I mean? Her weight isn't right. It doesn't fit what society says it should fit.
exactly.
You know, so how does that impact and affect the woman? And how does that impact and affect the child in
Right.
whom we are?
Again, let me approach this from a angle that has many angles. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing said this, and when she said it, I never forgot it. It left an indelible mark on my mind because she addressed it in such an articulate way, but it was straight to the point. She said this. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing said that it is hard to be called a bitch and a hoe constantly and wake up the next morning and do something creative. Because those type of words don't feed the creative aspect of the mother of civilization. See, the black woman is not just a parent in the sense of having children. She is the mother and the producer of civilization. And I think that these are the things that are overlooked. There would be no life on the planet if it wasn't for the original woman. Scientists have traced DNA. All people on the planet DNA has been traced back not to a man, but to one woman in Africa. And I found that unique because going back to hip hop, Nas said in a song called Black Girl Lost, he said, everything that moves be inside you. And I find that to be true because I understand the science of what is in the black woman in her genetic makeup. When you see everything, when you see every shade of woman, Shaka Khan put a finalization on it when she said, I'm every woman. It is all in me. Powerful statement. And I understand where she was coming from, and I support that idea. All women are in the black woman because all women come from our original woman, and that is pretty much a fact.
And and that's the whole point, to change the thought. We know that the thought is the creator of it all.
Yes.
So we know that who we are is thinking beings. We are a collection of thoughts.
Right.
We're a collection of the decisions we've made, the experiences we've had.
Right.
So we need to put back into the ethos,
Right.
into the air, into the ether,
Right.
into the vibrational tones, that our women should be respected, that they should be held high, that they are queens.
Right.
I mean, you did 31, I did 27.
Right.
And majority of the individuals who support individuals like us who are in that circumstance
All women.
are all women.
Right.
So we destroy ourselves. We destroy our culture every time we denigrate, every time we disrespect, and every time we put down our woman.
Right.
That's the whole point of the hip hop question.
Right.
That, it's to challenge our culture, to challenge our ideals,
right,
our truths that we hold, in the things that we celebrate.
right,
We can't, as a conscious, as a developing, aspiring culture or people,
Right.
survive or win by disrespecting and putting down our women.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
As long as that behavior continue to happen, we won't even be respected by other nations.
So, what brings to mind next with that then? Still dealing with culture, but the way sex is viewed and
Right,
that sexual energy.
right,
We familiar with the Kundalini, the seven
Right.
chakras,
right,
and that energy that flows up the spine, which is called cerebral spinal fluid.
right,
And it's that energy that we raise up through the chakras to turn on or awaken
right,
our pineal pituitary glands,
right,
to awaken that higher state of consciousness.
right,
Anytime we wastefully seek out sexual encounters to
right.
spill that seed,
Yes,
to destroy the seed, to wastefully throw away the seed
yes,
on the ground or in unfertile soil, as RZA would say.
exactly. Right,
You know what I mean? But anytime we do that, we destroying the best of us, or the
Right.
best part about us. So
Right.
in speaking about sex, how we view sex in our culture, how we approach it, how as young men we are taught, some of us, that our manhood is determined by
Right.
the amount of sexual partners that we could have,
Right.
or our sexual proclivity, how slick we are with finessing a woman to, you know what I
Right.
mean? You want to touch on that?
Yeah, I think that that's very much needed because the concept of pimping,
Mm,
right, and pimping out women actually came from the slave plantation.
mm.
Because the way the slave plantation was structured up, black men were used as breeders, like you use pit bulls
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
breed other pit bulls. And they weren't allowed to form bonds with these women. Sometimes the male slave was sent to a cabin with the sole purpose of impregnating the woman. Once she was pregnant, that man was taken to another cabin. And this same behavior was repeated from plantation to plantation without allowing any emotional attachment to the woman that he had just impregnated. And I think that that has perpetuated itself in our lives and in our reality to this day. Also, I need to add this because here's where the manipulation comes in. There's a science called tantric sex, since we were speaking on the Kundalini. And in the past, our older civilizations, the Chinese, they still use it. And a lot of our brothers and sisters in India. Tantric sex is when you cultivate the sex energy and you allow it to raise your Kundalini, meaning the serpentine force in your spine, to rise through different chakras or different energy centers in the body. Now, when you waste that, as the brother had already said, you actually weaken your reproductive ability and you weaken the life fluid that is in you. Now, this is how manipulative the powers that be are. They'll take a principle that was meant to mean something good and turn it into an orgy or sex for fun. When tantric sex was used to raise the consciousness at the point of climax or orgasm, At that point, that's where spiritual visualization was supposed to take place. Right at that point, where you reach that point, is where you should visualize what you want to accomplish. And I have to put this out there. What we call twerking today, what we are criticizing our women for doing all on Instagram and all at parties and all in the streets, we call it twerking. Do you know that that is a traditional African dance called mapuka? Mapuka was a spiritual dance that was used to keep the body in shape after women had become pregnant, to lose the excess weight, to help pull their uterus back in its original position. They did an exercise dance called mapuka that looks a lot like twerking. But like all Europeans, when they saw this dance, they over-sexualized it and lost the spiritual value of it. And there you have it in our people or our women's DNA to twerk. But they have no aim and no purpose for twerking. They don't even know the science behind where it comes from. And that's a whole nother avenue we could build on.
You know, that points to a pattern, that things that were meant to be spiritual blessings,
Right,
or spiritual experiences,
right,
are sexualized or are made to be something perverted,
right.
as opposed to, you know, its holy true self.
Exactly.
You hear stories about within some of the secret societies, when
Exactly.
a lot of the rituals,
Yes.
a lot of the rituals that were meant to bring about a certain thought,
Right.
certain traditions and forms and ceremonies,
Yes.
was meant to bring about a certain mindset, a certain level of consciousness,
Right.
and how it's been perverted
Right.
by those luciferous
Right.
individuals that take the true knowledge
Right.
and poison it. And that's the true example with the devil. Instead of a man with a pitchfork,
Right.
it's the individuals that take the true knowledge
Right.
and falsely use it or falsely apply it.
Exactly. The truth has been tainted.
Right.
And so when we stand before you and deliver the truth, it is something that you can't even digest anymore because the plate has been poisoned.
Right.
The mental food that once was nourishing and once helped develop the cerebral capacity of the man, woman, and child has been poisoned, and we eat this food and digest it, and we become something that we weren't even created to be.
You know, that's why I started from the womb earlier. And
Right,
I spoke about the
exactly.
belief in Santa Claus.
Right, right,
The belief that a man came, you know, down off a cross and walked.
right,
The belief that a man can fly on a carpet.
right.
You know, all of these things are myths.
Yes.
They are meant to train the mind as an infant, as a baby. Bunnies don't lay eggs, but you taught
That's
to
right.
believe in bunnies that lay chocolate eggs.
Right.
Why? Because it's a form to prepare your mind to be controlled,
Yes.
to believe that the extraordinary
Right.
happens outside of you.
Right.
Right? We taught to believe in these supernatural beings,
Right.
that we are disconnected from.
Right.
But like I often say, it's a difference between those who see the creator as a spirit and part of them,
Right.
as those who see the creator as something outside of themselves.
Right.
Those who recognize the creator as a spirit and part of themselves or a part of them,
Right.
they understand that they have the creator ability within them.
Right.
That they have the ability or the power to create.
Right.
Those who see God as something outside of themselves,
Right.
believe that that type of power or
Right.
that type of force is something so foreign and
Mhm.
outside of themselves.
I find that question or that statement powerful because when we look at all of the spiritual books that have ever been laid down as guideposts for man's behavior, they all give you direct answers. Once we add what we want to it, turn it into something else. When you read the Quran says Allah is closer to man than his own jugular vein. If Allah is closer to you than your own jugular vein, and your jugular veins are two thick trunk veins on each side of the neck that carry oxygen to the brain, if Allah is closer to you than your own jugular vein, how can Allah not be in you? Allah says in the Quran, I breathed into Adam. If he breathed his breath in Adam, this means that Adam's respiratory system was compatible enough to receive the breath of God in the first place. Then a command is given by the almighty angels. After man was created and manifested with the power of Allah's breath in him, Allah told the angels to do something that he had never asked them to do. He told them to bow down to Adam. That's powerful.
Sure.
Who was man? What type of spiritual and prolific power did man possess that the angels themselves had to bow down to man? And all praise is due to Allah, yet Allah told the angels, bow down to man.
And man is the vicegerent, the Lord.
Exactly.
The Lord of this plane.
Exactly.
You know, and that's the purpose of Knowledge of Self TV. You know,
Right.
that's the purpose of it, for us to be able to develop that self.
Right.
For the audience to glean wisdom and learn from what we putting forth so that they could build and learn about themselves.
Exactly.
The point was starting a culture to unravel some of the issues that's befalling our community.
Right.
Because as leaders,
Right.
as men of our community,
Right.
right, it's our responsibility to take our role, to take our place,
Right.
to be the solution, to be the answers. Oftentimes we hear people look at TV and they say, why don't somebody do something? I wish somebody would do something.
Right.
But it's us who, you know, are in those communities whose mission and job and responsibility it is to do something.
Right. I think that a lot of times, and I say this quote a lot, and this is one of my quotes, right? I have to put emphasis on that.
Mhm.
Some of our people would rather stay in a self-induced coma. They'd rather put themselves in a coma through drugs, liquor, oversaturate themselves with material things before they stand up and man the responsibility that they was created to do. They would rather exist in a self-induced coma because they don't have to handle the responsibility that falls on the shoulder of them. And let me say this while we building on the culture and the influence of our community. When you're in the womb of your mother, you grow from the inside out and not from the outside in. So when you get a brain, the brain tells the arm what to do. You don't get an arm or a leg before you get a brain to tell it what to do. The inside of you was developed first. Yet when we wake up in the morning, we give no attention to the inside of us, yet this was first in the order of existence. We pay attention to the outward shell. We want to know if our hair wavy, if our outfit match, if our face look like we want it to look, but we never give ourselves an inward check. How was my disposition today? How was my vibration? How was my energy? How do I feel inwardly? Because I'm about to subject myself to people outwardly. And before I expose them to a negative mood, let me give myself a checkup from the neck up so I know where I'm at before I even step out into the world and engage with other people.
That's powerful. Self-examination.
Right, self-examination.
Self-evaluation.
Right.
You know, if we don't check ourselves, if we don't monitor our own actions,
right,
if we don't correct our own behavior,
exactly,
right, we'll never develop, we'll never grow.
Exactly.
And we have to be open to a constructive criticism of others that point things out to us about us.
Right.
Because sometimes we learn better through other people's eyes about ourselves.
Exactly.
Because sometimes other people see us better than we see ourselves.
Facts.
Right? But as we go on, I want you to speak a little bit about yourself as a writer.
Right.
You wrote a number of books, The Dark Side of God's Light.
Yes.
You know, I've read before, masterwork.
Yes,
you know,
I appreciate that.
Right. So, you know, I want to start from this book, but talk a little bit about yourself as a writer.
Right.
Your goals, your aims as a writer.
Right.
And about the books you've written, because there's a question in The Dark Side of God's Light I want to ask you about.
Yes, sir. In respect to my science of writing and my approach to it, the first thing that I wanted to do as a writer was try to answer all the questions that I had asked in religion and in the world myself. But what I did not want to do is have to write a 1,000-page book to do that. So a lot of my work is precise and to the point. A lot of times people write 500 pages, 600 pages, and they'll talk about every damn thing but what the title of the book is really about. And so what I decided to do was I decided to write something that would hold your attention because it's not a big book, but I wanted the questions to be so powerful and so direct that it would get your attention. Basically, what I wanted to do was write a book and say in less than 100 words what it would take somebody else 10,000 words to say. And that sums it up.
Okay, all right. So talk about the books. Tell me about the dark side of God's light.
Well, the dark side of God's light basically deals, part one, basically deals with scripture, how the Bible and how we interpret it and how it has been presented to us can never lead you to true liberation because it wasn't written in English. A lot of the dialogue in the Bible is symbolic. We take it literal because it has been fed to us during the times of slavery as a slave book. Keep this in mind. It was used as a weapon against us because our enemy saw that we were a spiritual people. So like all things, he took spirituality and handcuffed us with it. As opposed to spirituality and religion liberating us, it became a pair of handcuffs. And so the dark side of God's light is a liberating tool so you can see that a lot of things in here are symbolic or outright fabrications. When Constantine got a hold of power, Constantine, what he said was when he grabbed the cross, the Christian cross, he said, under this sign shall I conquer. So he didn't galvanize Christians. He didn't organize them to free the masses from ignorance and civilize them. He used it as a political tool to conquer people because once a people believe that God has ordained for them to rule over you, you won't feel like you can challenge that type of rulership because you think they are backed by God.
You know, I specifically want to ask about the serpent.
Yes.
You speak about the serpent in Genesis. You speak about the history of the serpent.
Right.
You know, it's timely because when you think about St. Patrick's Day,
right,
and you think about how our people dress up and wear green during St. Patrick's Day,
right,
but they may not realize that when you celebrate St. Patrick's Day, you're celebrating the killing of 1 million of our people.
Right.
Right. Ireland had a people called the Pelagians.
That's right.
Right. Pelagius. He was around during the Nicene Council where his teachings was, his followers was. The beef was, or the argument was about original sin.
That's right.
The Pelagians believed that man wasn't born in sin.
Right.
That man had the capability, the capacity to demonstrate God-like ability. To overcome any sexual desire, any physical urge, any lower self nature that hampers man. The Pelagians taught this. So when St. Patrick came from Europe to Ireland, he said, I came with the call to wipe these Pelagians out. We believe in original sin. Right? So the story goes that St. Patrick got rid of the serpents. But the serpent in that instance is representative of that culture or that belief about the chakras, about the serpentine fire, about the kundalini, about how man has the ability to be God-like within himself. So when we see the serpent in the Genesis story, that's a story of within. That's not the story of this physical thing talking to you. That's not the story of a physical apple. It's a subjective story meant to explain or convey a spiritual truth.
Exactly. I think that when I began to write about that degree in Genesis in my book, I was explaining the science of the serpent. And one of the main things that I wanted to demystify was the fact that the serpent was a person. The serpent was a person who had the active ability to raise the kundalini at will. And that particular ruler in that garden wanted them subjected under his rulership until that kundalini, the serpent or the serpentine fire in them was raised. That's when they became liberated. God, or the story goes about this entity that they call God. Now, this doesn't mean I don't believe in a creator. What I'm saying is that the Bible is a manipulated piece of work. This is why that God in the garden didn't know certain things. He had to ask Adam, where are you? He had to say, who told you about this or who told you about that? Surely he's not speaking like an all-knowing God that know everything before it happens the way we have been presented to accept God.
And it's important to note that there's a difference between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2.
Right.
And Genesis 1 is the 7-day theory.
Right.
Where man is created on the 6th day after
Right.
all the animals,
Right.
the beasts, and the flying things.
Right.
But in Genesis 2, the Adam and Eve story,
Right.
Adam is created.
Mm-hmm.
Adam is lonely, so the animals are formed to be helpmates for Adam.
Mm-hmm.
The animals wasn't good enough, so then God created Eve, or Lord God created Eve. Because to support your theory is that the name changes from God
to Lord God, which is a
degree.
different degree and a different title. And this is what happens when you try to interpret something from an original script and put it in a script that was not yours.
Right.
So what happens is now manipulation comes into play because they have to edit certain things out to the point where the original work no longer looks the same.
Right.
And so the serpent became a literal serpent that crawls on the ground.
Right.
Not a serpentine force that exists within you called Kundalini that is raised up through the chakras. Now, the God in the Bible says, I will curse the serpent and make him crawl on his belly. This implies that the serpent wasn't always crawling if part of his curse is to make him crawl on his belly.
Right.
If I was already a snake on the ground, how could you curse me by making me crawl on the ground if I was already crawling? Obviously, this is a symbolic story where whoever taught Eve how to raise the serpentine force in her was brought to a state that was low. They were humbled to the point where it looked like now when you was walking proudly, now you are crawling. Now, also in that story, to answer your question, there's two creations taking place. The first Adam and Eve that are created in Genesis 1 is a different Adam or Eve from Genesis 2.
Okay.
In Genesis 2, that Eve was taken from Adam's rib and a deep sleep was put upon him. In Genesis 1, it says, 126, it says, let us make man. In our image, after our likeness. No individual God is speaking. It is a us and a our that is speaking. So this group of beings created that man in his image and in his likeness. And that man, neither one of them are the original man.
And, that speaks to the original translation.
Right.
Because the God that's translated in the Bible, in the original language, is the word Elohim.
That's right.
Elohim is a masculine and feminine plural word.
That's right.
So it means more than one.
Group.
So when you hear us and we, and they'll tell you, it's talking about the royal we. But, they don't understand there's a deeper degree to it. But to go back to the serpent. Now, I always, or from my study, I believe the serpent is representative of our culture, of our teaching. And God cursing the serpent is them cursing us. And cursing our way of thinking or our tradition, our original tradition.
Facts.
Even at the Nicene Council, there were arguments made about original sin versus self-determination. Right. So now our people, our culture is focused on looking for a savior. Looking for an individual to come down off a cross, down a chimney, hopping through the trees, to come and save them, as opposed to letting self-determination be the God and focusing on saving themselves.
Now, allow me to expound on that about the serpent. When we look at the Hebrew root to the word serpent, it is the word nikhash. And that Hebrew definition means he who knows secrets.
So the serpent was somebody who possessed a secret knowledge that these people were afraid of. This secret knowledge that could liberate you from all of your fears, all of your limitations, and raise you up into a consciousness that you did not have. To further prove my point, when you look at the crown on the pharaohs of Egypt, you see a serpent or a cobra
Uraeus.
on that crown called the Uraeus serpent. The hieroglyph, Nekhbet, the hieroglyph for a goddess was a serpent. So when you approach the pharaoh, he was protected from the front of his thinking. That's why it's on the front of his crown, by the wisdom of the goddess. On the other side was a falcon or a bird. And this is another symbol that represented the wings of the dove. And so when you see the symbol on the ambulance or medical products, you see a staff with a serpent wrapped around the staff and wings at the top. These wings represent that ancient symbol from Egypt that there's a healing power or a medicine in the serpent and in the wings. Jesus said, Yahshua said in the book of Revelations, he said, be wise as a serpent, but humble as a dove. John said that when the children was bitten, Moses said in the book of John, when the children of Israel were bitten by poisonous snakes, he took the symbol of another snake and put it on a brass pole. And a brass symbol of the brass serpent healed the children of Israel from the poisonous bites of other snakes. All of this is high symbolism and deep science if you don't understand or comprehend. What it represents is somebody with a deeper wisdom and a more profound knowledge exposed the false snakes. And they allowed them to be disposed of by their magnificent wisdom.
You know, and see, wonderful. The serpent in all those instances represent a consciousness,
right?
A state of self-awareness,
right?
It's either the lower consciousness or the higher consciousness,
right?
So to bring it full circle back to culture, back to religion, back to family. Now, our culture once was a culture permeated with the thought that every man is on the mission or the road to self-development to be as a god or goddess. The new culture, the Western culture, comes in and say, no, man has not that power. Man is born in a state that he could never reach his full potential. That the only way he could be as intended is to humble himself and believe in this. Right. So the dichotomy I'm showing is between a culture focused on the development of the people, versus a culture focused on keeping the people enslaved for economic reasons, for self-control reasons, or whatever reason. So that's where we find ourselves today. How do we get our people on the road to self-discovery? What messages do we need to utilize, or what truth do we need to push to get our people focused on self-discovery, as opposed to, I was born in this lonely or lowly state and I can never become as intended?
I think that one of the main things that we can use to liberate them is this kind of dialogue that we are doing right now. Because this is what is really missing. It is this exchange of ideas and concepts that will allow them to go back and do more research, to not be blindly led by belief. I can believe you got a gun in your boot. That don't mean it's a gun in your boot. That's just what I believe. And I think people have been passing belief off as knowledge. Now, if I can produce the gun in your boot, that means it is a fact now. But until it is produced, I am just stuck in a circle of belief. Also, another thing I think that what we have to do to liberate them is master these books. how to interpret them where they are right and exact down into
That's
the
right.
present
That's right.
times that we live
right.
in.
That's right.
Because my mother prayed to God when her rent was due. My mother asked Jesus to help her with problems. That Jesus never answered. That idea or that concept of praying to a mystery God or a force outside of you, when you pray to God, you're asking the God faculty in you and the creator of the universe and the outerverse to aid and assist you in your accomplishments. Then you get up and do it armed with that
So,
faith.
Faith with works.
This is why you cannot accomplish anything with a belief about yourself distorted.
Mm.
If you don't believe you're not connected to a creator, then you will not create anything.
Mm.
You're just not going to be able to do it. Your belief, your ideas, and your concepts have to be supportive of who you are. And this is how they separated us from us. They took and created a false reality by allowing us to fall in love with things that give us nothing. Earlier, you talked about fairy tales like Santa Claus and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It is a strategic plot to fill our children's minds with these things so when they grow up, they can stay relying on something that does not produce anything.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so even the streams of thought that they follow as adults reflect the falsehood and the myth and the lie of the beliefs in false fairy tales.
You know, I think that's important how those, in culture again, how, it's a war.
Right,
It's a war for the minds of our people.
right,
But a lot of those thoughts are put in you so young that they mature, they strengthen, they grow strong, strong tree trunks in your souls, in your mind, where they become fortified, and it's hard to break away from those beliefs.
right,
It's hard to see differently than you've been trained to see or believe.
right,
And the goal is to break those chains
right,
of illusion, of delusion, of self-delusion, of low self-esteem,
right,
of not having confidence. The
right,
goal is to transmute, is
right,
to overcome that lowly state,
right,
to begin to strive on that stream of consciousness
right.
or that level to be better in life.
Exactly. And I think that one thing about information,
Mm.
it comes from within. The same way I explained how you were formed inwardly in the womb of your mother,
Mm.
every source of whatever you need is already in you.
Sure.
The scripture verifies if the breath of Allah was blown in man, and nobody has the ability to take that breath out of you but Allah,
Right.
then this breath should activate you and push and drive you to create, to do things. You know what I'm saying? When you read Genesis, it's talk about giving man dominion over all of these things. Give
Right.
him dominion over the earth, over the
Right.
water, over the birds. This dominion is rulership.
And the rulership, and the developing that, and the pushing forward of that, is the developing your thoughts, having
Right.
higher thoughts, more
Exactly.
positive thoughts.
Right.
Thoughts are living, breathing things.
Right,
And
exactly.
they give life. So
Right.
your thoughts are life. You got to understand that when you take in positive thoughts, you take in life.
Right.
But when you take in negative thoughts, you taking in death.
Right.
You taking in things that destroy you. That's
Right.
why the nation of the gods and earth talk about what? Build and destroy.
That's right.
Certain thoughts build, certain thoughts destroy.
That's right.
But that we gonna have to leave it there for now. And
Well-
we gonna have to leave it there for now.
Yes.
But next time we come back, we'll talk about consciousness.
Right.
We'll talk about the power of thoughts, the formulating of thoughts,
Yes.
thinking, willing, understanding, and reason,
Right.
and how to move out and being a thinking being. Before time
Yes.
end, tell people how they could get your books.
Yeah, this is my first copy of my book, The Dark Side of God's Light, Part 1. This is The Dark Side of God's Light, Part 2. For those who are interested in the secret science of the Shriners and Freemasons, I also have a book called America's Secret Society Agenda and the role that the Masons have played behind the scenes the whole time. And all of this can be found right on my Instagram page. Go on my Instagram, Lakhem_Godface, and the book link is right there. Again, that's Lakhem_Godface, and the book link is right on my page. And trust me, you will have a good read.
The God in the moat, find up. More
Better
coming,
believe
get
it.
ready.
More coming next
More
week.
coming.
It's Lakhem, aka Godface, up in JS Studios, man. You know what it is. After 31 years in the can. Yo, it's Godface for real, man. It's the camouflage chameleonist. You got the skills to build with this or even deal with this. 5% officialist, specialist, demolitionist, abolitionist, expert exhibitionist, mathematics ridiculous. You couldn't comprehend the totality of your reality. And if you put up your salary, you couldn't stop the fatality of casualty. And if you stepped into my mental galaxy, you couldn't comprehend the analogy. Inhale the vapor from my cerebrals, it'll irritate your nostrils like allergy. Challenge me. I walk through the hood with ghetto type tactics. My thoughts automatic, sporadic, enigmatic, 5% fanatic when I drop the mathematics. Me and the guards be tight like yin and yang. I bust gat worse than West Coast gangbang. I flip the script and make the Ku Klux Klan hang. Plus I'm blessed with knowledge that's not found in colleges. Black anthropologists, my style gets deep like mathologists. 5% exoticness, eroticness. Off the top, who fucking with this? I got 5% intuition and wisdom that's way deeper than Christians. I walk through your ghetto jurisdictions with no restrictions. Actual facts, God, this is not actual fiction. 45-degree angle, I stand in that position of tough guys in the ghetto living rough lives. Mental gat, let me bust mine. I spit razor sharp gym star to cut through your fresh like Ninja Star. Hey yo, it's Lakhem, Godface the God.